The Rules Committee will come to order. We are here for consideration of H.R. 2018, the Clean Water Cooperative Federalism Act of 2011. We're very happy to welcome three members of the committee, the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Gibbs, my California colleague, Ms. Napolitano, and my colleague from my home state of Missouri, Mr. Carnahan. So, Mr. Gibbs, let me say to you and your two colleagues at the table that it appears that you have a brilliantly written, prepared statement there, and I'd like to say that unless there's objection it will be included in the record, and we'd welcome your summary.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you say, 2018 was narrowly crafted to clarify and restore the balance between the states and the federal government in implementing the Clean Water Act. I think it's interesting you talk about the U.S. EPA has done some questionable tactics to usurp the state's rules in setting water quality standards and invalidate legally issued permits by the state. This legislation restricts the EPA's ability to issue, revise, or new water quality standard for a pollutant whenever a state has adopted an already EPA-approved water quality standard for that pollutant. And also, EPA is from withdrawing its previous approval of state's NPDES water quality permitting program, or from limiting federal financial assistance for a state water quality permitting program on the basis that the EPA disagrees with the state. The bill also restricts EPA from objecting to NPDES permits issued by a state. And lastly, the bill clarifies that the EPA can veto an Army Corps of Engineers Clean Water Act Section 404 permitting decision only when the state concurs with the veto. In the hearings that we had, this bill did pass out of the T&I Committee 35-19, bipartisan support. The hearings we had in the subcommittee really dealt with the nutrient standards and setting an all-one-fits-all rule by the EPA that causes all kinds of issues and concerns with the states, and also that there an unprecedented action the federal EPA did by revoking a permit that was issued 3 years previous for not being in violation of that permit, and against the will of the state EPA and with no new information from the Army Corps of Engineers. So basically, to summarize, this bill really encourages cooperativism between the state EPAs and the federal EPA, and lets the states deal with issues that, because the differences going on in different locales of the country, instead of all one size fits all.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gibbs, for that very clear explanation. A brilliant performance in your first appearance before the Rules Committee, if I can pass judgment on that. And I know it'll be matched by my friends, Ms. Napolitano and Mr. Carnahan. So, Ms. Napolitano.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and I will have the statement for the record, but I'd like to quote from the New York Times 25 years ago. The Republicans have begun at phase 2 of their campaign to destroy the network of laws developed over 25 years to protect the nation's environment. Until last week, they have attacked by stealth and indirection using the promise of regulatory reform to weaken enforcement of those laws. Phase 2 is more direct, but just as bad. The new law, by contrast, will postpone any further improvement in water quality unless it can be proved that the benefits in health, swimmability, fish stocks, whatever, are worth the cost. And, Mr. Chairman, as you well know, you have been a champion for the cleanup of a Superfund listed contaminated site of probably the size of one of the smaller states in our union. Had it not been for EPA's going after the PRPs, the provincially responsible parties, that many have thought would be not achievable because they had either gone defunct, just moved on, farming, et cetera, et cetera. It protects the water of millions of people in our area. Yet we need to ensure that EPA can continue to protect the public health, the environmental laws that have protected our farming areas. Our farmers have said that the wetlands act as a natural filter, providing clean water for irrigation that is crucial for agricultural production. So it isn't just the wacko environmentalists that are in support of being able to have EPA oversee and be sure that we do continue to protect water that is vital to our economy. I don't know how many are looking at what is currently being proposed, not proposed, revealed by research and universities and many of the world agencies that are looking at water being one of the most precious things we're going to have to start looking because of climate change. We are losing the caps, the iceberg caps. We're losing a lot of our ability to store it underwater. And if we don't protect what we have above the ground, then we're going to be in deep trouble in the future, not only to provide potable water for our constituency, but the water that our communities need to attract economy, business that provides that economy for our cities. The amendment will simply ensure that any waters that EPA determines provide flood protection for communities are valuable fish and wildlife habitat that provide benefits to the economy, or coastal recreational waters that can be continued to be protected. In essence, the amendment that Mr. Markey proposes, and I'm here on his behalf, unfortunately he could not be here to propose it himself, amendment number 12, does just that. We need to keep our streams healthy, our rivers flowing clean, and we need to continue to ensure that we understand that our economies estimate that each acre of wetland provides more than $10,000 per person in public benefits per year. That's combined. So what we're trying to say is don't throw out the baby out with the bathwater, and don't change total law. If you're going to do some changes, ensure that the states still have the ability to provide the protection of those areas that we have for so long deemed at risk. And so with that, we want to ensure the amendment remains in place for our fish, our wildlife, our habitat, our communities, our farms, and guarantee that the past is not repeated.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. You made it very clear. Mr. Carnahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Slaughter. It's great to be back, and thank you for all the work you all do here before stuff gets to the floor. I really have two simple amendments, and it really comes from our experience being a state. We are in the state of Missouri, as you well know, Mr. Chairman. We're upstream and downstream from a lot of other states, and we understand the implications of that and how critical it is for our economy, but also that we cooperate between the states. My first amendment, Amendment 9, gets right to the heart of this legislation. It would guarantee that downstream states, like Missouri or others, have a say when other states take steps that might endanger the health of our water. Congress enacted the Clean Water Act in '72 to address the patchwork of water quality regulations that states have put in place, but one state's high standards are of little use if an adjacent or upstream state does not abide by those equal type of standards. My second amendment, Amendment 10, would ensure that communities that have access to clean, safe drinking water as they recover from floods. Missouri especially and other communities around the nation have been hit with record-breaking floods and other natural disasters that can have a tremendous impact on the health of the water in our communities. I would urge the community to support this amendment so the communities recovering from floods and other natural disasters don't have to worry about the cleanliness of their drinking water while they're working to rebuild those very communities. So with that,
thank you very much.
Ask for your support and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments, and thanks for being here. Thanks to both of you for your work. The only thing that I would just say very briefly is that I think that the notion behind this is not to gut the ability of the EPA, and if you want to respond, Mr. Gibbs, to the comments from this New York Times piece, but to in fact create an opportunity for greater coordination between the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and state environmental entities. And that's my sense of what it is, because I would not want to be part of an effort that does in fact gut that, because as you've said very well, and you and I have worked closely together on this, Grace, dealing with perchlorate cleanup in Los Angeles, which has been a very serious problem from the disposal of spent rocket fuel that was done during the buildup in the Cold War, and our joint effort on that, big bipartisan effort with our colleagues in the area, has been key to dealing with a very serious problem. And so I just, as I mean, that New York Times piece is kind of frightening, and I wouldn't want to be characterized as being part of that. And I see Mr. Gibbs nodding, and I hope very much this legislation that I'm poised to support isn't going to in fact be gutting the ability for there to be some federal involvement here if it's necessary. So
yeah, I think you hit it right on the nose, Mr. Chairman. That I think it's important to keep in mind that when the states are out enforcing environmental laws, that they've already got the plan in place that was approved by the U.S. EPA. And we had testimony from some state directors of the EPA where they're enforcing the rules that are already approved, and then the U.S. EPA has come in lately and changed the ball game, and it puts them at odds. And I was really amazed in the testimony we had from the state EPAs where, you know, it's become a very adversarial relationship, and we all want clean water and clean air and all that. And unfortunately, these amendments, if you look at particulars, they put in certain parameters that have to happen, like the floods in the last 5 years. Well, what they're saying is that then this bill doesn't apply. The state doesn't have the authority, the jurisdiction, but the U.S. EPA can come in, and we want them to come in and work together.
But the underlying legislation doesn't in any way, I mean, to me, it promotes greater coordination between the state and federal entities.
Yeah.
And you're nodding your head yes, and Ms. Napolitano is shaking her head no. And so it reminds me of Thomas Jefferson's famous line that two thinking people can be given the exact same set of facts and draw different conclusions.
Let me give you another example on the nutrient standard. The EPA is proposed, and Florida is in litigation on this, on the phosphorus standard, setting what they call a numerical number, a number of standard. And if the problem you have in this example, there's things going on in rivers or streams across the country are all different. The biology is different, the pH is different, the water temperature, the flow, and to set one number that affects that, because you could go to a river and have a phosphorus level that can be higher than that number and have all the right biological things happening, and you can have the reverse happening. And so it's better to let the states or the locals determine that, what we call it under the narrative standard, to apply all those things that's happening in that river and that watershed and make the right determination. And the problem is EPA at the federal level has moved to a one-size-fits-all program, and we could actually go backwards.
Let me just say, Mr. Gibbs, that you have stated your opposition to a number of the amendments that have been submitted to this committee, but I am going to encourage this committee to make most all of the amendments that have been submitted. I mean, not every single one, but we want to make sure that every major issue that is put before us is addressed. And I know that Mr. Carnahan has an amendment or two, and I hope he might be able to address his. And Ms. Napolitano has been speaking on behalf of the Markey Amendment. And I do think that members have a right to deal with the major issues on the floor, and so I'm going to encourage a process that will allow the opportunity for members to offer those proposals. Ms. Fox.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I thank the panelists for being here, and I have no questions.
Ms. Slaughter.
Well, this makes me pretty sad. I didn't expect in my lifetime we would go from the Cuyahoga River catching on fire in Ohio and the determination in the United States that we were going to clean up our water supply to go back to say, what? Oh, never mind. I was brought up in Appalachia. I remember some of the horror stories there. The mountaintop removal is really, I think, a terrible thing for me personally. Let me just use it personally. And now I live on one of the Great Lakes, which contains 20% of the planet's fresh water, and we do everything in the world we can to protect that. The human being can go as long as one can without food, but about 4 days without water. And the water quality, according to a poll, I think in 2009, was the #1 issue in the United States. But I know it's going to go. So I'd like to ask unanimous consent to have a statement of the administration policy.
Without objection, the administration policy will be...
Thank you. The President says if presented with this legislation, he will veto it. And I also have a statement from American Rivers, Clean Water Action, Clean Water Network, Defenders of Wildlife, Earth Justice, Environment America, League of Conservation Voters, Natural Resources Defense Council, Sierra Club, and the Southern Environmental Law Center. I'd like to do those as well, Mr. Chair.
Those will be included in the record as well.
Mr. Carnahan, what do you think the chances are you can keep that dirty water in one state?
0.
Agree. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sessions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Governor.
I just want to associate myself with the comments of our ranking member, and I have no questions.
Bishop.
Also thank all of you for being here. Clean Water Act is a wonderful example of what Congress can do when it decides to abrogate its responsibility in using very broad language and allow an administrative branch to try and define what those terms actually mean. And that's not something that's new, but we do it repeatedly. And it's not something that is a new issue because 2 Supreme Court decisions have said the same thing, that the Clean Water Act is written imprecisely and it is being administered differently in different parts of the country by different administrative agencies because we failed in the responsibility to try and write specific language. We failed in the ability of defining what navigable actually is, whether it's historic or whether it's concurrent, whether it's persistent. This is an effort, I'm proud to say, takes a first step. It's not a complete step, but it's the first step to try and at least bring some kind of accountability in the system. We have developed a system which, if one bureaucrat decides a decision is made, that bureaucrat has total, unlimited power to implement that decision regardless of whether the rest of the state, the rest of humanity, or even logic is in defiance. If indeed water can run uphill, as one official determined, then maybe the current language we have is adequate. But if I don't believe water runs uphill, as one federal agent determined, then I think there needs to be some kind of an opportunity to have evaluation and have accountability in the system. We don't have it now. The status quo does not work. It is ineffective. And if this is a step forward, I think it is to allow at least the states to have some kind of say because they have as much concern about this country as the federal government does. This is a step in the right direction. But I will say right now, the status quo is wrong. It is not working. It does not solve our problem. It does not provide accountability. So I thank you for bringing it here. I look forward to listening to the various amendments that will be presented, and we'll see what happens.
Mr. Hastings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas.
Ms. Jackson Lee's testimony. We very much appreciate
Thank you.
Ms. Jackson Lee's testimony.
In addition, thank you. I appreciate that. In addition, yeah, right, and quite frankly, I don't care. Also, I ask unanimous consent for the statement of my colleague from Florida, Mr. Deutsch, to be made a part of the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Deutsch points to something that I heartily endorse, and that is that the Florida Everglades is a particularly unique habitat and ecosystem, and in fact, it's the third largest park in the continental United States. It also provides for 33% of the drinking water, potable fresh water for people. The added concern is our governor in the state of Florida has stopped regulatory agencies from undertaking their actions at all. So without having an opportunity for the EPA to involve itself, we stand to hurt that critical ecosystem, and those of us from Florida are vitally concerned about that. Mr. Gibbs, I do have a question for you, if you don't mind. How many hearings were held on the water bill?
We had a hearing on the nutrients. We had 2 other hearings on the permit revocation, so that's 3. And we might have had a 4th one, but we had 3 for sure. That this bill came out of the full committee T&I, but the hearings originated.
When did the
bill?
When did the bill come out?
About a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now.
So it's referred to then as fast tracking in one sense of the word. You all had to do something to get this up and running, and that that's your prerogative. I'm not quarreling with that. But the bill has been fast tracked.
Well, I think it's important. We had these hearings. We see what's the overreach of the U.S. EPA, and that I think it's important to pass this legislation to get jobs, get this economy going, and get people back to work. And I have a letter I want to submit to the record, Mr. Chairman, to support support of 2018 by, well, I don't know, maybe several hundred entities around the United States, the Chamber of Commerce, American Farm Bureau, and on and on and on.
Right.
And so this is really a jobs bill too.
Is that right? You recognize in Florida that water is particularly critical, not just potable fresh water, but clean water, and that we have continuing disagreements with the states of Alabama and Georgia. Water doesn't have any boundaries, and we are downstream from them. Yet we do have one interesting river. The St. Johns is the only river that flows north. But that said,
I think-
how will this bill cause our resolution with Alabama and our issue?
I think everybody forgets one important critical piece, that when the state of Florida is implementing their clean water standards and their permits and all that, and Alabama is, those programs already had to be previously approved by the U.S. EPA, so they're already involved. And so what we're saying now is, the states, you've already got the approved program, but it's you to administer it and work cooperative with the feds. So, the problem we've had is the feds want to come in and do a one-size-fits-all, and it's causing all kinds of problems, and it's stifling economic growth. And I think the other important thing to remember is we can protect and enhance the environment and have a strong, growing economy, and I think that provides the resources to do that.
Well, you and I just, I guess, have a fundamental disagreement. I have not seen all of the damage, and I've been in the issues for all of 19 years in dealing with nutrient issues, as a for example. And over the course of the last few years, more than 20 members of the Florida delegation have addressed the EPA with reference to nutrient standards. But I'm here to tell you that, number one, I consider the naming of this measure to be almost funny. It isn't about federalism. One minute, and no fault of your own, but one minute your leadership is bringing us something about light bulbs on one side of the issue of federalism, and now you come back and claim that this is federalism. Someone referred to it as farce. And again, I don't know that you had the naming responsibilities, but I've had a lot of involvement over the course of years with federalism, and I don't think that this approaches that, nor do I think that it addresses in a meaningful way. While I hear the arguments of my colleague, Mr. Micah, and Mr. Rahal, when they say that this is going to lead to cooperation. Well, we've had all of these years that I'm here, and Alabama and Florida haven't cooperated, and Georgia and Florida haven't cooperated. And I got news for you. Over time, potable fresh water is going to, not only in Florida, but in this nation, and not only in this nation, but this world, lead to more conflict than issues having to do with fossil fuel. If I took you to Central Asia, if I took you to some other places around the world, you would see evidence of that. There's nothing to suggest that jobs are going to be made all that much better. You may not live in a community like I do. I live near Hollywood, Florida, that for every year that I've lived there, 43, they've dumped raw sewage into the ocean. And we've had dead zones in the Gulf over and over and over again. So you're going to tell me that's going to be a job maker. It might be a job maker in Ohio for you to have smokestacks and stuff burning up the Cuyahoga River, but it's not for me in Florida. And I just make that clear.
Well,
let me ask Grace if you have a reaction to what I had to say. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Hastings, it's something that we have had to deal with in California, and as you're well aware, California has the highest, strictest standards of most all states on water quality and water air quality. So we continually push the envelope in that area. It makes our state greener. It provides for more tourism. It is still a very attractive state for people to go find jobs for a number of reasons I won't go into. But it is because of the quality of the water and the quality of the environment that has been the enforcement of the rules that protect our water quality. And you're right. The water itself doesn't produce the jobs. It is what brings that economy because of that water quality and quantity availability. And I feel for Florida because I've looked into that issue of the nitrates, nutrients, et cetera. And I don't know why we're not really focusing on how do we address the nation's issue with water instead of picking and choosing different areas to work on instead of trying to get an agency that has been at the forefront, whether we like it or not, and I'm for EPA, I've always have been, we work with them consistently, that will force the issue for having potential responsible parties do the cleanup. I mean, and that includes the federal government, the armed forces. I have a tank farm that has JP4 and JP5 fuel that's contaminated of my whole area. So while others may think it does not work in some areas, it has worked tremendously well in my area and many of the other areas in California. So as far as the fact that what this bill may do, the whole bill, I think to what I was alluding to when you saw me shaking my head is that my personal feeling is that this is going to try to weaken EPA and EPA's ability to do what they have always done to protect our citizens' potable water.
You use a word that's kind, it's going to gut. In spite of what the chairman said, Mr. Gibbs, you were going to react to my remark.
Well, I like to say, if Hollywood, Florida is discharging raw sewage into the Gulf or the ocean, wherever the case may be, they're in violation of the law now, both state law and federal law, and that's a separate issue, which I think there's a lot of talk that's going back. I lived 13 miles from the Cuyahoga River up in Cleveland, Ohio, in my childhood, and I remember when it caught on fire twice. And we had a serious problem, and that's what brought about the Clean Water Act, the U.S. EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in 1972. And we've come a long ways, and the states are geared up now and can do a lot of things. And I think when you got the states at the state level addressing these issues, we're working cooperatively with the U.S. EPA. We can do a lot of things.
What do you do with a state like mine, where the governor just got through saying he ain't gonna have no? He just stopped all agencies from any form of regulation. What do I do? How do I protect the Everglades?
I can't talk to your specific instance.
Then I would go to the Environmental Protection Agency, and that's exactly what it's for.
Well, if I would say, and my staff can correct me, if the state of, in this case, Florida, is in violation of their approved plan they've had on the books with the U.S. EPA, then the U.S. EPA probably can step in and take care of it.
Well, I won't take an awful lot of
But
time.
the U.S. EPA wants to come in and change the plan that's already been approved.
Well, I appreciate your position, but I really do not understand, not you, I do not understand how on one day we are for the states undertaking their responsibilities and on another day they aren't. Now, I've lived this my whole life, this states' rights issue. It's been a part of my existence and my career. So I kind of like understand a lot about it, but we can't have it both ways. And not you and this piece of legislation, but for the benefit of my colleagues, hypocrisy reigns supreme when on one day you are telling me that federalism exists, and then on another day you tell me something different. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I've been listening to this conversation, I'll just say to my friends, Ms. Slaughter, you're right. You can't keep water from flowing from one state to the next, though the dam that would do that is located in my district. And if I could get Mr. Hastings and you to help me co-sponsor legislation to get the Corps to go ahead and build that dam just 2 feet higher, we can make sure that never nary a drop of water flows out of the great state of Georgia into Florida. We're struggling with that. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I want to say, and the chairman of this committee had the wisdom to name a freshman as a subcommittee chairman on this committee. I just want to say to my colleague what a delight it is to see him here making this case, because I do think that when folks stay in town too long, you get invested in the solution that you came up with. Ms. Napolitano, I thought you made a very persuasive case for why folks should be in California because of what Californians decided they wanted their state to be like. As I listened to the list of folks that Ms. Slaughter was reading that oppose this legislation, I just know with certainty there is not a person on that list that cares more about the Chattahoochee River than I do. There is not a person on that list that cares more about Gwinnett County drinking water than I do. And my governor knows that. My governor's a former colleague of those of you who were here last year in Governor Deal. And in these tough economic times, you talked, Ms. Napolitano, about the environment being a job attractor. I think that's right. I think folks know, as goes their transportation infrastructure, their education infrastructure, and their water infrastructure, so goes their economy. I just couldn't agree with my colleague from Florida more. We're going to have more wars over water than we're going to have over oil in the coming times. And so why it is we find the need to pit the federal system against this state system in which folks are working so hard to take care of their own backyard, to police their own problems. I just say to you, Mr. Gibbs, it's refreshing to have someone who's not invested in the current regulatory system, who's just invested in trying to find a way out. I will tell you that my sister and my brother-in-law and my two beautiful nieces live in your district and are counting on you to sort through those things, and I have great confidence that you will. So I thank you all for being here, and I thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
No comments. If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gibbs, I appreciate you being here, particularly as a freshman. We're glad to see another freshman in the chairmanship, and to the other panel members. Going back to Mr. Hastings' comments, I don't disagree with him as relates to the state of Florida and the need for clean water. I mean, we're surrounded, we're a peninsula, we need fresh water supplies. But prior to this election, back in 2010, prior to the election, the Florida EPA, before it has been, as Mr. Hastings said, basically downgraded, the Florida EPA came out specifically against the numeric nutrient regulations that the U.S. EPA was trying to do one size fits all. Because we know in Florida that we have naturally occurring phosphorus. Actually, the water that flows into Lake Okeechobee has naturally occurring phosphorus. And the sugarcane industry, when the water flows out after they utilize it, actually what happens is the sugarcane absorbs most of that naturally occurring phosphorus. The water is actually cleaner in that regards. So one size does not fit all, and I believe the EPA, Florida EPA, over a year ago came out with a study that said it was going to cost billions of dollars for the state of Florida, not only in agricultural loss of jobs, but also the cost to cities and counties that provide municipal water treatment plants, that the regulation was going to be overburdensome in regards to the requirements of Florida. So where it is today, I can't comment, but where it was over a year and a half ago when they did their study on numeric nutrients, it was clear that Florida had a good grasp. Florida has more water quality studies, data than any other state in the union. Did they testify in front of your committee?
Yes, they did, and you're absolutely correct. And I'm trying to recollect on their testimony where they are in the negotiation litigation with the U.S. EPA, and as I recollect, there's something on hold a little bit because their standard was actually higher than what they were proposing.
Right.
But they were still, U.S. EPA was still going after them, and so it was a real problem.
And one last comment: the Withlacoochee River runs north too, Mr. Hastings, from the Green Swamp up to the outlet just north of Citrus County. So I appreciate it and thank you very much.
Scott Webster. Thanks.
One thing, Mr. Chairman. Grace is a great softball pitcher, and I was sad she wasn't able to make the game the other night. She had to be out of town for other reasons, but
Grandson graduated.
yes, that's what I heard. But you are a good player.
Thank you.
He is a good player. Great to see all three of you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for being here, and look forward to considering it on the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Our final witness is the gentlewoman from Hawaii, Ms. Hanabusa. Thank you very much for being here. And say with the other panelists that the prepared statement that you have will appear in the record in its entirety. And we welcome you again to the Committee on Rules. And we'll look forward
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I have an amendment to H.R. 2018, and just for the record, the CBO has informed us that there is no cost. And what this amendment simply seeks is to add to the end of the bill that a report be done by the EPA 1 year after the date of enactment and annually thereafter, which basically reports to us any increases in waterborne pathogenic microorganisms, including protozoal, viruses, bacteria, and parasites, as well as toxic chemicals and toxic metals. As we have heard the prior comments by not only this panel, but by the members of this committee, you can imagine for myself, for the state of Hawaii, which is completely surrounded by water, and who tourism is its major industry, that any kind of influence that the water quality will have will truly affect our industry and our major economic engine in the state. It's for those reasons that I believe that as we look at this particular bill, H.R. 201H, which gives to the states the ability and the right to not only monitor themselves, but to set the standards with the EPA's concurrence, that what we as Congress need to know is when those standards are exceeded. Because, as you know, under this present bill, there is no change to any of those standards unless there's a concurrence between both the state and the EPA. So all it seeks is a reporting to us, transparency, as well as knowledge to all of us, plus all of our constituents.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Hanabusa. Let me say that I'm going to recommend to the committee that your amendment be made in order, and I hope we'll have an opportunity to debate it on the House floor if I'm not overruled by this committee when I offer that proposal. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have no questions. Mr. Sessions?
You know, you've done very well to have such a staunch supporter on this committee, Ms. Hanabusa, and I congratulate you on that. Thank you for being before the Rules Committee.
So I take
Thank
that as
you.
your support of my request to make her amendment.
Thank you very much.
Slaughter, you're not going to oppose me, are you? No. I didn't think so. Ms. Fox? No. Mr. McGovern?
I hope it's not because the chair said he supports.
In his case, I speak against it to get his support. So, Mr. Bishop, Mr. Hastings, thank you, Mr. Woodall, Mr. Polis, Mr. Nugent, Mr. Scott, Mr. Webster. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much.
We look forward to it. So, we have copies of the rule here. Let me, as we prepare to receive the motion of the gentleman, just explain that we've had 12 amendments that have been submitted to the committee, and this rule will propose that we make 10 of those 12 in order. We're dealing with all of the major issues that have been put before us, and the chair will be in receipt of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move the committee report a structured rule for consideration of H.R. 2018, the Clean Water Cooperative Federalism Act of 2011. The rule provides 1 hour general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Transportation Infrastructure. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Transportation Infrastructure, now printed in the bill, shall be considered as an original bill for the purpose of amendment, shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes in order only those amendments printed in the report accompanying the resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report and may be offered only by a member designated in the report. Shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. All points of order against consideration of the amendments printed in the report are waived. Finally, the rule provides one motion recommit with or without instruction.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman from Dallas. As I look at the litany of amendments made in order here, we have 2 Jackson Lee amendments, and that came by virtue of the fact that Mr. Hastings submitted Ms. Jackson Lee's statement for the record, as I said. The Hanabusa amendment is made in order. Our colleague on the committee, Mr. Polis, has an amendment that is made in order here. Mr. Connolly, Mr. Deutsch, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Markey, and Mr. Fazio from Oregon has an amendment. with Mr. Edward. Was that Ed Markey? Is that the same? Oh, that's the same. Oh, I see Edward on the second page here. And Mr. Carnahan. So by, I guess, a 9-to-1 ratio, we have Democratic amendments made in order. So I would hope very much that we'd be able to have the support of the committee for this. Are there any amendments?
Yes.
Oh, Mr. McGovern.
I have a couple of amendments. First, I move the committee make an order and provide any necessary waivers for amendments number 9 offered by Mr. Carnahan, which would restrict the application of the bill in the case where a state requests the application of water quality standards based on pollutants originating in another state. And number 3, offered by Ms. Castor, which would direct 80% of fines and penalties collected in relation to deep water to activities to address the impact of the oil spill.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman. Any further discussion? If not, the vote occurs on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The chair of the noes have it. The noes have it. The motion is carried.
One other
Further
amendment.
amendments.
I move the committee
Mr. McGovern.
report an open rule for consideration of H.R. 2018 so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments to this bill.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman. Any discussion? If not, the vote occurs on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The chair of the noes have it. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions?
No.
Mr. Sessions, no. Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster? No. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Slaughter? Aye. Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings?
He's been gone a long time. You're just now listening. I think if you want to have this discussion, when don't we create this discussion after this? He left after about 5.
Good guy.
So how'd you vote? He voted no. Okay. Oh, okay. No, you're welcome to vote. You're welcome to talk as long as you want to vote with us. We're happy to have you.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No. I just wanted to give you time to total it up. That's the reason I was waiting, Hugh. So now that we went through the Hastings dance there, you've got it all figured out? What's the total?
4 yeas and 8 nays.
4 yeas and 8 nays, and the amendment is not agreed to. The vote now occurs on the motion of the gentleman from Dallas, Mr. Sessions. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Aye. The chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. You want a roll call on this? Okay, Mr. Polis, I know you want us to strike your amendment, then we might get some support for it, Mr. Polis. Yeah. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions?
Aye.
Mr. Sessions, aye. Ms. Fox? Aye. Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Nugent? Aye. Mr. Nugent, aye. Mr. Scott? Aye. Mr. Scott, aye. Mr. Webster? Mr. Webster, aye. Ms. Slaughter? No. Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern? No. Mr. Hastings? No. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis? No. Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman?
Aye. The clerk will report the total.
8 yeas, 3 nays.
I'd like to announce to the committee that tomorrow is Mr. Bishop's birthday, and as a gift, we are going to allow him to manage this rule on the House floor. And Mr. Polis, not celebrating our birthday, I presume, but you and Mr. Bishop will be able to do that. We look forward to it. Thank you all very much, and without objection, the committee stands adjourned.